You blinked this morning, but the version of you who didn't also woke up. They're still lying in bed, watching the ceiling melt into a soft panic, wondering if today will be another copy of yesterday. Somewhere else, a version of you never made it home. They turned left instead of right, answered a message they should have ignored, said yes to the wrong smile. That version is still alive, just not here, not in this thread of time. But sometimes they dream of you, a version who made the right mistake. Every choice you didn't make was made, just not by the you watching this. Every doubt you crushed still whispered to a different self who listened instead. There's a version of you who never quit, who stayed, who trained harder, who forgave that person, who forgave themselves. But even that version failed, just in a different direction. The you that exists right now isn't the best version, or the worst, or the most real. You're just the one who's tuned in, for now. Think of reality like a frequency. The self you wake up in is just one station. Regret is what happens when you hear echoes of another version through static. Now listen closely. Here comes a strange kind of help. You don't need to be your best self, just the most aligned. That means the version of you who does the boring thing with conviction, who quietly fixes what's broken, the one who doesn't wait to feel ready. Start thinking like them, not because you should, but because they already exist, and you can borrow their momentum. There's no such thing as becoming, only tuning. People think change is a ladder, but really, it's a hallway full of unlocked doors. Most people never check the knobs. They stare at the one that slammed shut and scream at it to open. Don't. Turn around. Try the next one. And the next. Some doors only open when you're not looking. Now ask yourself this. What version of you is already doing what you're afraid to try? Can you see them clearly? Feel how they breathe? Start acting like you already are them, because you are somewhere. Imposter syndrome is just the ghost of a version of you who believes in you more than you do. You're not the main character, you're the intersection. Every possible version of you is crowding this moment, and you're the one who chose to look. That gives you a power they don't have. Presence. Most people sleepwalk through their lives, following scripts written by copies of copies. But presence makes the multiverse blink. Here's the trap. Most people try to find themselves by digging deeper into who they've already been. But the self isn't a fossil. It's a fog. And the harder you dig, the more you scatter it. The real trick is to act like the version of you who already escaped the maze. Think clearly now. What would they do? Today. Not next week. Not when it's perfect. Today. Right now. While your coffee's still warm and your doubts haven't started screaming yet. Micro decisions. Bend timelines. Not declarations. Not affirmations. Actions. There's a version of you who stopped doom scrolling, who went outside, who walked in silence, who stretched their spine and said no to something that drains them. That version already paid the price, so you don't have to. Copy their posture, copy their breathing. Let the better version of you haunt the one who's still waiting. You can time travel through behavior. Want to be someone different, do something different before your brain catches on. Don't warn it, don't explain, just move. Every action is a tuning fork. vibrating you closer to a timeline that already exists, a life waiting for you to match its rhythm. Don't fix your mindset, fix your environment. That's your lever. You can't think your way out of a prison, your habits keep rebuilding. But change one variable, one cue, one room, one notification, and suddenly, the version of you who believes again starts waking up early. Discipline is just memory from a better self sent backwards. Now, here's the cruel part. Some versions of you are monsters. They never healed. They lied more than they needed to. They learned manipulation instead of love. And they still exist, just a few decisions away. That's why every moment matters. Every yes, every no, you're always slipping closer to something. So choose carefully who you echo. Here's the cheat code. Your brain can't tell the difference between imagination and memory if the image is vivid enough. So vividly imagine the version of you who has what you want. Not their possessions, their rituals, their rules, their quiet boundaries. Now mimic just one thing. Not the hardest thing, just the smallest. Let it compound. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from every version of you who failed, but almost didn't. Their effort is still in the system. Their sweat stains the edges of your timeline. They're rooting for you, because if you win, they get to collapse into you and finally rest. Here's something almost no one realizes. You can choose a new personality. Not fake it. Choose it. Identity is just a habit loop in disguise. Most people are addicted to being themselves because it feels familiar. But the familiar is not the truth. It's just the most repeated version. And whatever you repeat, you become. So repeat something dangerous, something inconvenient, something the laziest version of you would hate, like waking up before the algorithm feeds you, like deleting that app before it steals another hour, like moving your body in a way that makes tomorrow hurt less. You don't need a total reset, just a shift in rhythm. One new ritual, the smallest crack in your loop, can undo the entire spell. Try this. Next time you hear yourself say, "That's just who I am," pause, breathe, let that sentence dissolve like static. Because it isn't. It never was. You are a weather system of chemicals and choices, constantly changing, constantly remixing. You're not fixed. You're not finished. You're not that sentence. Now lean in. Here's a paradox. The fastest way to become someone else is to act like you already are. Don't aim for a feeling, aim for a rhythm. Identity follows repetition, not inspiration. Want to be disciplined? Do one thing disciplined people do, without expecting motivation first. That's how you steal energy from better versions of yourself. That's how you time hop, without a machine. Here's your next practical glitch. Choose a trigger habit. Something so small it feels stupid. 10 seconds of stillness, one push-up, a cold splash of water. That tiny habit is the knife you use to cut open a better timeline. Use it every day at the same time, and watch how your brain starts asking for more. Not because it believes, but because it remembers. You don't need permission to start over. You don't even need a reason. You just need to confuse the loop, surprise it, make one move that doesn't match the past, and you'll wake up somewhere new. The algorithm of you is watching. Feed it something unexpected. Somewhere, there's a version of you who didn't survive. They gave up 1 inch too soon, and you're only here because they didn't make it. That's not morbid, that's a miracle. You're the echo of every failed self who almost quit, but didn't. You owe them something, not guilt, but momentum. Keep moving, because they can't. Here's something to repeat when it gets too heavy. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm trying to stay in motion. Motion is the only antidote to identity loops. Perfection is just fear wearing makeup. You'll never feel ready, that's the point. The timeline you want is allergic to waiting. Now, a harder truth. Most people don't change because they secretly enjoy the pain. It's predictable. It gives them an excuse. It lets them be both victim and storyteller at the same time. But you've seen too much. You know how many versions of yourself are waiting. If you don't change now, you're abandoning them, and they'll never get their turn to breathe. Let that sink in. You're not just saving yourself, you're collapsing timelines. Every time you break a cycle, you erase 1,000 wasted versions. Every time you forgive faster, you dissolve a future full of resentment. Every time you say no when it's uncomfortable, you silence a version of you who learned too late. Here's a trick you can use in real time. When you're about to slip into the loop, ask yourself, which version of me wants this? The tired one? The scared one? The one who thinks small to stay safe? Then pause and act like the version who doesn't even ask that question. The one who already knows what matters. Borrow their instincts. You can always return them later. And remember this, when you want to quit, imagine explaining it to the version of you who never got the chance, the one who was one breath away from trying. What would you say to them? That it was too hard? Too inconvenient? Or would you keep going, just to show them it was possible? Here's where it loops back. The version of you who finishes this thought becomes the one who never forgets it. Not because it's inspirational, but because it's operational. This isn't a story, it's a script. One you can perform without applause. One that quietly rewrites your chemistry, without anyone noticing. The timeline you want isn't waiting at some imaginary finish line. It's hiding in your next repetition. Repetition is reality's way of asking, are you serious this time? If the answer is yes, don't speak it. Prove it in the most boring way possible. Show up again and again, until the version of you who never does gets bored and fades away. You're allowed to leave the loop by boring it to death. Loops feed on novelty, on crisis, on drama. Starve them with routine, kill them with silence, destroy them by doing the same unsexy action every day until it becomes holy. Let me leave you with a final trick. Whenever you're stuck, whisper this to yourself. Some version of me already figured this out, and I am becoming them, right now. Then act before your brain disagrees. Act before the doubt finishes its sentence. Act while the portal is still open. That window is small, but it's real. And if you slip through it even once, the algorithm updates. You're not on a journey, you're a collision point. Between every failed attempt and every future victory. Between every fear you've inherited and every truth you haven't earned yet. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to stop rehearsing the wrong version. Collapse the timeline. Confuse the loop. Remember that choice is a frequency, and you're the static that makes it human. You've always had this power. You just finally tuned in.